Grease covered Roy's hands as he twisted the wrench one more time. The hydraulic pump finally stopped its annoying whine and settled into a steady hum. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve and left another black streak across his face. This was the third broken mining rig this week. Station Carthage attracted the worst-maintained equipment in the sector. Someone knocked on the repair bay door. Roy ignored it. People always wanted things fixed faster than physics allowed. The knocking got louder. "Bay's closed until I finish this job," Roy shouted without looking up. The door slid open anyway. Commander Wells stood there looking nervous. "That was never good." "We have a situation," Wells said. Roy set down his wrench. "The gravity stabilizers?" "How did you know?" "Because everything on the station is held together with hope and bad decisions." "What's wrong with them?" Wells pulled out a data pad. "They're failing. We got maybe 6 hours before the whole station loses gravity control." Roy took the pad and scrolled through the readings. His stomach dropped. This wasn't just a simple failure. The main stabilizer core had cracked. Without it, the station would tear itself apart from its own rotation. "You need to evacuate," Roy said. "There's no fixing this without a complete core replacement." "We can't evacuate." Wells looked even more nervous now. "The Galactic Knights are here." Roy looked up. "What?" "They arrived 20 minutes ago. They're escorting Ambassador Lidhan to the treaty signing. If they leave now, the whole peace negotiation falls apart. The war with the Dominion starts again." "That's not my problem." "Roy, please. 15,000 people live on this station. If we lose gravity control while trying to evacuate, hundreds will die in the chaos." Roy stared at the data pad. He knew this problem. He'd seen it before. Years ago, on a military vessel, he tried to fix this exact issue. They'd pulled him out before he could finish. 3 officers died when the stabilizers failed. They blamed him, dishonorably discharged for reckless endangerment. "The Knights have their own technicians," Roy said. "Their technician says it needs 12 hours and replacement parts we don't have." "Then I can't help either." Wells grabbed his shoulder. "You fixed the impossible before. Everyone on this station knows it. That mining ship last year that everyone said would explode, you had it running in 3 days. This is different." "Ow!" Roy didn't answer. He couldn't explain that every time he looked at a gravity stabilizer, he saw those 3 officers floating in the corridor, dead because he wasn't fast enough. The station shuddered. A low groan echoed through the walls. Several tools fell off Roy's workbench. "That's the stabilizers losing alignment," Roy said quietly. "It'll get worse." Wells waited. Roy cursed under his breath. "Where are the Knights?" They found Knight Captain Aldrich in the station's command center. He wore ceremonial armor that probably cost more than everything Roy owned. 3 other Knights stood around him, looking at displays showing the station's systems. "Commander Wells," Aldrich said without turning, "your technician has completed his assessment." "Not exactly," Wells said. "This is Roy Brennan. He's our chief engineer." Aldrich finally looked at Roy. His expression showed exactly what he thought of the greasy mechanic in worn coveralls. "Our certified technician has already examined the problem," Aldrich said. "We require proper replacement parts and time to install them correctly." "You don't have time," Roy said. "The core is cracked. Every minute that passes makes it worse. In 6 hours, this station will shake itself apart, which is why we are arranging for emergency parts delivery. That'll take 8 hours minimum. You'll be dead before they arrive." One of the other Knights stepped forward. His armor had fewer decorations. "Watch your tone, civilian." "Soren," Aldrich said calmly. "Let him speak." He turned back to Roy. "You have an alternative solution?" Roy pulled out a portable display and connected it to the command center systems. "I can bypass the damaged core by rerouting power through the secondary atmosphere processors. Use coolant from the docked mining ships to handle the heat buildup. It'll give you 48 hours of stable gravity." The Knight's technician, a thin man with perfect posture, laughed. "Impossible. The heat alone would cause cascade failures in every connected system." "Not if you balance the load correctly," Roy said. "I've done the calculations." When the technician asked, "Just now?" "In my head." Aldrich studied Roy for a long moment. "You expect us to trust mental calculations for a repair that could kill everyone aboard this station? No, Roy said. I expect you to give me 2 hours to prove it works. The station shuddered again, harder this time. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm started blaring. Aldrich looked at his knights, then at Ambassador Lithin's ship docked outside the viewports. The fate of billions rested on whether that ship made it to the treaty signing. You have 2 hours, Aldrich said. But if this fails, you'll answer for it. Roy almost laughed. Answer for it? They'd all be dead. I need access to the main junction and 3 dock workers who know how to move fast, Roy said. Soren will accompany you, Aldrich said. The younger knight didn't look happy about it, but he nodded. Roy headed for the door. He had 2 hours to do what he'd failed to do 7 years ago. 2 hours to prove he wasn't the screw-up they said he was. 2 hours to save 15,000 lives with a plan that had already gotten 3 people killed. He pushed the thought away and started walking faster. The station's groan followed him through the corridors like a ghost. The main junction smelled like burned wiring and fear. Roy ran his hand along the damaged stabilizer core and felt the crack vibrating under his fingers. Worse than the readings suggested. Much worse. This is insane, Knight Lieutenant Soren said behind him. You're going to get everyone killed. Roy didn't answer. He was already calculating flow rates in his head. The secondary atmosphere processors could handle 60% of the load, maybe 70% if he pushed them. The coolant system from the mining ships would need precise calibration. 3 dock workers arrived, carrying equipment. Roy recognized 2 of them. Good. They knew how to follow instructions without asking stupid questions. Run coolant lines from docking bays 4, 7, and 9, Roy said. Connect them to junction points Alpha, Delta, and Gamma. I need full flow capacity in 90 minutes. The workers looked at each other. That's 3 different ship types, one of them said. Their coolant systems aren't compatible. They are if you use converter valves, Roy said. He pulled out a marker and started drawing on the wall. Set them up like this. The pressure differential will actually help balance the flow. The workers stared at his diagram. Then they nodded and ran off. Soren watched them go. You're very confident for someone working with incompatible systems. Incompatible just means nobody's bothered to make them work together yet. Roy opened an access panel and started pulling cables. Hand me that voltage tester. I'm not your assistant. Then stand there and look decorative. That armor's good for something. Soren's face went red, but he grabbed the tester and handed it over. Roy checked each cable connection. The power rerouting would put enormous strain on systems never designed for this kind of load. One weak connection, and the whole thing would fail catastrophically. Why are you really doing this? Soren asked. Because I'm the only one who can. No, the Knight's technician could order replacement parts. We could evacuate most of the station. You're risking everything on an untested theory. Roy pulled another cable. Your technician is an idiot. Replacement parts take too long. Evacuation and failing gravity kills people. This is the only option. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Roy's hands paused for just a second. Something like it, Roy said. And I'm still here, aren't I? The station shuddered. The lights flickered. Somewhere far away, metal groaned like a dying animal. Roy worked faster. His fingers moved through the cables with practiced efficiency. Connect, test, secure. Connect, test, secure. Each connection had to be perfect. No second chances. The calculations you did in your head, Soren said. How accurate are they? Accurate enough. That's not an answer. Roy stopped working and looked at the Knight. You want the truth? I'm guessing on about 40% of this. The heat buildup depends on variables I can't measure until the system's running. The coolant flow rates are theoretical, and I have no idea if the atmosphere processors can actually handle the load without melting. Soren's eyes went wide. Then why? Because 40% certainty is better than 0% survival. Now shut up and let me work. The dock workers returned, dragging coolant lines. Roy directed them to the connection points. The lines were different colors, different thicknesses, different manufacturers. It looked like a mess. It was a mess, but it would work. It had to work. Begin coolant flow on my mark, Roy said. He pulled up a control interface and started entering commands. Rerouting primary power in 3, 2, 1 mark. The junction hummed. Then it roared. Power surged through cables that had been dormant for years. The atmospheric processors kicked into overdrive. Temperature readings started climbing. "Coolant flow now," Roy shouted. The workers opened the valves. 3 different types of coolant mixed in the converter system. The temperature readings stopped climbing, started dropping. Slowly, Roy watched the numbers. Too slow. The heat was building faster than expected. "Increase flow by 20%, he said. "That'll exceed safe pressure," one of the workers said. "Do it anyway." The worker hesitated, then adjusted the valves. The temperature drop accelerated. The numbers started looking better. Then alarms started blaring throughout the junction. "Heat spike in corridor 12, Soren said, reading a display. Temperature just jumped 50 degrees. Roy checked his interface. The rerouted power was creating a bottleneck. Heat was concentrating in one section of the system instead of distributing evenly. "I need to manually adjust the flow valves in that corridor," Roy said. "The temperature there is already past 200 degrees, Soren said. "You'll cook before you reach the valves." Roy grabbed a heat suit from the emergency locker. "Then I better work fast. This is suicide. This is the job." Roy pulled on the suit. It was rated for short exposures to extreme heat. Very short exposures. He'd have maybe 10 minutes before the suit's cooling system failed. "Keep monitoring the main readings," Roy told the workers. "If anything spikes, shut it all down. That'll destroy the station," one of them said. "Better than destroying it with me inside it." Roy headed for corridor 12. The heat hit him before he even reached the entrance. The air itself seemed to shimmer. His suit's cooling system kicked in immediately, fighting to keep his body temperature stable. He entered the corridor. The walls glowed dull red. The temperature gauge on his suit showed 230 degrees and climbing. The manual valves were at the far end, 50 meters away. Might as well be 50 kilometers. Roy started walking. Each step felt like pushing through thick mud. The heat pressed against him from all sides. His breathing sounded loud inside the helmet. 20 meters. The suit's cooling system whined with effort. 30 meters. Sweat poured down his face. 40 meters. His vision started to blur. He reached the valves. His hands shook as he grabbed the first wheel. The metal was so hot it glowed, even through his insulated gloves. He turned it slowly, carefully, watching the pressure readings on a nearby display. The temperature in the corridor dropped 5 degrees. 10 degrees. He moved to the second valve. His suit alarm started beeping. Cooling system at 60% capacity. Turn the wheel. Watch the readings. The heat was redistributing now, spreading evenly through the system like it was supposed to. Third valve. His suit alarm got louder. Cooling at 40%. The corridor temperature was dropping faster now. Down to 190. 180. Fourth valve. Final one. His hands could barely grip the wheel anymore. Everything felt distant and slow. He turned it. The system balanced. All readings went green. Roy collapsed against the wall. His suit alarm screamed at him. Cooling system at 15%. He needed to get out. Now. He pushed himself off the wall and started walking back toward the entrance. The corridor felt longer than before. Each step took enormous effort. 10 meters from the exit, his suit cooling failed completely. The heat slammed into him like a physical force. He stumbled, kept moving, had to keep moving. 5 meters. His vision went dark around the edges. 3 meters. Strong hands grabbed him and pulled him through the doorway. Cool air hit his face as someone ripped off his helmet. Roy gasped and looked up. Soren stared down at him, still holding him upright. "You're completely insane," the knight said. Roy managed a weak smile. "Did it work?" Soren helped him to a bench and pulled out a datapad. He checked the readings, and his expression shifted to something like wonder. "The stabilizers are holding," Soren said quietly. "Temperature is stable. Power flow is balanced." Roy closed his eyes. His whole body shook from heat exhaustion, but he'd done it. The station was safe. "How long will it last?" Soren asked. Roy opened his eyes. 48 hours. Maybe longer if we're lucky. The ambassador can leave in 6 hours. Then everyone gets to live. Roy tried to stand up and nearly fell over. Soren caught him again. "You need medical attention. I need water and 10 minutes to sit down." The The knight studied him for a moment, then nodded. You've earned both. Above them, the station's groan faded to silence. For the first time in hours, Station Carthage felt solid and safe. Roy kept his promise. Now, he just had to hope it held. 2 hours later, Roy sat in the command center watching displays he didn't trust. Numbers could lie. Systems could fail. He'd learned that the hard way. Knight Captain Aldrich stood across from him, arms crossed. Your repair is holding. I'll admit I had doubts. Still have them, Roy said. This is a temporary fix. You need real parts and proper installation, which we're arranging. Aldrich gestured to the displays. However, the ambassador's departure window is in 4 hours. Our protocol requires full system diagnostics before we allow him to leave. Those diagnostics take 8 hours. Roy shrugged. So run them after he leaves. Unacceptable. We cannot risk the ambassador's life on an untested repair. It's not untested. It's working right now. One of the other knights spoke up. Working now doesn't mean working in 4 hours. Systems can degrade. Your solution is unconventional at best. Roy stood up. His legs still felt shaky from the heat exposure, but he was done sitting. Then what do you want from me? Aldrich met his eyes. I want your assurance that this station will remain stable during the ambassador's departure. I can't give you that. Nobody can. I fixed the immediate problem. The long-term problem needs parts one don't have and time you won't give me. Then we delay the departure. And the treaty fails. The war starts again. Billionsty. Roy shook his head. Great plan. Soren stepped forward. He'd been quiet since pulling Roy from the corridor. There might be another option. Aldrich looked at him. Speak. The mechanic stays at the manual controls during departure. If anything fails, he can compensate immediately. Roy stared at Soren. You want me to sit in a superheated junction for 4 hours? The temperature is stable now. It won't reach dangerous levels unless something fails. And if something fails while I'm in there? Soren didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew what would happen. The heat would spike in seconds. Roy would be trapped with no way out. He'd cook alive before anyone could reach him. Absolutely not, Commander Wells said. I won't order someone to commit suicide. You're not ordering me, Roy said quietly. I'm volunteering. Everyone turned to look at him. You're serious? Wells asked. Roy thought about the 3 officers. The ones who died because he wasn't there to fix the problem. He thought about 15,000 people on this station. He thought about the billions who would die if the war restarted. I'm serious, Roy said. I'll stay at the manual controls. If anything goes wrong, I'll be right there to handle it. Aldrich studied him for a long moment. Why would you do this? Because it's the job. No civilian engineer would consider this part of their job. Roy almost laughed. I'm not like most civilian engineers. Soren cleared his throat. Captain, I witnessed his work in Corridor 12. He understands these systems better than anyone I've served with. If he says he can maintain stability, I believe him. The other knights looked surprised. Soren's testimony meant something to them. Honor and courage were their whole culture. A knight vouching for someone carried weight. Ambassador Lithin's voice came over the comm system. I've been listening to this debate. The mechanic has my permission to take this risk. More importantly, he has my gratitude. Aldrich nodded slowly. Very well. Roy Brennan, you will maintain position at the manual controls from now until 2 hours after the ambassador's fleet clears our gravity well. Agreed. Wells grabbed Roy's arm. You don't have to do this. Yeah, Idal. Roy pulled his arm free gently. Give me 3 water containers, a basic comm unit, and a new heat suit. I'll need supplies for a long wait. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur. Roy gathered his equipment and headed back to the junction. The temperature had stabilized at a manageable 70 degrees. Hot, but not dangerous. As long as nothing failed. He set up his position near the manual valves. The comm unit gave him direct access to the command center. The water would keep him hydrated. The heat suit hung nearby, ready if things went wrong. Soren appeared in the doorway. I wanted to say something before the ambassador departs. Say it fast. I've got 17 displays to monitor. What happened 7 years ago? On the military vessel. Roy kept his eyes on the displays. Why do you care? Because you're risking your life for people you don't know. Nobody does that without a reason. Roy was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke without looking at the night. I was a military engineer. Good at my job. Maybe too good. I noticed things other people missed. Found problems before they became critical. He adjusted a valve slightly. One day, I found evidence of smuggling. 3 officers were using military ships to move illegal weapons. I reported it. That was the right thing to do. They didn't see it that way. They sabotaged the gravity stabilizers on their own ship, planned to destroy the evidence and blame it on system failure. I figured out what they'd done and tried to fix it. Roy's hands tightened on the valve wheel. My commanding officer pulled me out before I finished. Said I was being reckless. The stabilizers failed an hour later. Those 3 officers died. But you try to save them. Doesn't matter. The investigation found that my attempted repair actually made things worse. Never mind that I was trying to fix sabotage. Never mind that I could have succeeded if they'd let me finish. I got blamed. Dishonorably discharged for reckless endangerment. Soren was quiet. You're doing this to prove you were right. No. Roy finally looked at him. I'm doing this because I know I can. 7 years ago, they didn't let me finish. This time, nobody's pulling me out. The knight nodded slowly. I understand. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I think they were wrong about you. Thanks. Soren left. Roy was alone with his displays and his memories. The next 4 hours tested every bit of his skill. The ambassador's fleet began departure procedures exactly on schedule. As the massive ships detached from the station and maneuvered into position, their gravitational fields created stress patterns Roy had to compensate for constantly. A coolant line developed a slow leak. He patched it with sealant foam while monitoring 6 other systems. Power flow shifted in an unexpected pattern. He adjusted 3 valves to redistribute the load. The temperature in Corridor 9 started climbing. He redirected coolant from Corridor 4 to compensate. Every problem was small. Every solution was simple. But there were dozens of problems happening simultaneously, requiring instant responses. Roy worked in a state of pure focus. The rest of the universe disappeared. There's only the displays, the valves, the numbers that needed to stay green. Commander Wells checked on him every 10 minutes. How are you holding up? I'm Fina. Temperature is stable. The ambassador's fleet is clearing the gravity well now. Good. Tell them to fly safe. Another hour passed. The strain on the station decreased as the fleet moved farther away. The displays showed better numbers. More green, less yellow, no red at all. Finally, Aldrich's voice came through the comm. The ambassador's fleet has successfully cleared the gravity well and jumped to hyperspace. You are clear to exit your position. Roy kept monitoring the displays. I'll stay another hour, just to be sure. That wasn't part of our agreement. Consider a bonus. He heard what might have been a chuckle from the night captain. As you wish. Roy stayed at his post for 2 more hours. When he finally emerged, his clothes were soaked with sweat and his hands were shaking. But every display behind him showed green. The station crew waited in the corridor. They started clapping when they saw him. Roy waved them off. Just doing my job. But he couldn't help smiling a little. For the first time in 7 years, he'd finished what he started. He'd proven, at least to himself, that he wasn't the failure they said he was. The station groaned once more, softly, like it was settling into place. Roy patted the wall as he walked past. You're welcome, he whispered. 3 days passed. Roy replaced the temporary coolant lines with proper connections. He reinforced the weakest sections of the rerouted power system. The permanent parts finally arrived, and he supervised their installation personally. The station was safe now. Really safe, not just temporarily patched together. Roy should have felt satisfied. Instead, he felt restless. He was tightening the final bolt on the new stabilizer core when Commander Wells found him in the junction. You have visitors, Wells said. Roy didn't look up. Tell them I'm busy. It's the Galactic Knights. They specifically requested to see you. Roy set down his wrench. They already left. I watched their ships jump to hyperspace. One vessel returned this morning. Knight Captain Aldrich and Knight Lieutenant Soren are waiting in my office. Roy grabbed a rag and wiped his hands. The grease didn't come off. It never really did. Fina, let's get this over with. The The two knights stood when Roy entered the office. Both wore their full ceremonial armor. It seemed excessive for a space station meeting. Roy Brennan, Aldrich said formally. Thank you for seeing us. You're welcome. What do you want? Soren looked uncomfortable. Aldrich just smiled slightly. Direct as always, Aldrich said. Very well. We have come to discuss your past. Roy tensed. My past is none of your business. Normally, I would agree. However, Ambassador Lidhan was curious about the mechanic who saved his life. He asked us to investigate your service record. And Aldrich pulled out a datapad. Your discharge was listed as dishonorable. Reckless endangerment resulting in 3 deaths. We found this puzzling given your obvious competence. Competence doesn't mean much when people die. True. So we looked deeper. Aldrich handed him the datapad. We found the original incident reports. The unedited ones. Roy stared at the screen. He saw technical diagrams he remembered drawing 7 years ago. Testimony he'd given that was never included in the official record. Evidence of sabotage that had been buried. How did you get this? Roy asked quietly. The Galactic Knights have certain investigative privileges. We used them. Aldrich's expression was serious now. Those 3 officers were running a smuggling operation. They sabotaged their own ship to destroy evidence when you discovered them. You attempted to repair the damage. Your commanding officer stopped you, claiming your methods were too dangerous. I know all this. I was there. What you may not know is that your commanding officer was part of the smuggling ring. He pulled you out specifically to ensure the repair would fail. The 3 officers died, the evidence was destroyed, and you were blamed to close the investigation quickly. Roy's hands clenched around the datapad. You're telling me my CEO murdered 3 people and framed me for it? We're telling you that the evidence supports this conclusion. Your commanding officer retired 6 months later with full honors. He lives comfortably on a colony world now. The anger rose in Roy's chest like a physical force. 7 years. 7 years of thinking he'd failed. 7 years of people looking at him like he was incompetent. 7 years of working on backwater stations where nobody asked questions. All because someone decided he was a convenient scapegoat. Why are you telling me this? Roy asked. Soren spoke up. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because we have a proposition. I'm not interested in joining the Knights. That's not what we're offering, Aldrich said. We want you to serve as master engineer for the Knight fleet. You would have complete authority over all technical operations and training. You would teach our engineers to think the way you do. Roy laughed. It came out bitter. You want me to teach Knights? They barely listened to me during the crisis. Which is exactly why we need you, Soren said. We've been trained to follow protocols and procedures. We're very good at doing things the proper way. But when the proper way doesn't work, we struggle. You didn't struggle. You adapted. Only because you showed us how. Soren stepped closer. The Knights are the galaxy's protectors. We're supposed to keep people safe. But we've become so focused on ceremony and tradition that we've forgotten practical knowledge matters too. You could change that. Roy set down the datapad. You're offering me a position of authority over people who will resent me. People who think mechanics are beneath them. People who value their fancy armor more than actual skill. Some will resent you, Aldrich admitted. But others will learn from you. And over time, the culture will shift. We can make this official. Your discharge will be changed to honorable. Your record will show the truth about what happened. It was everything Roy had wanted for 7 years. Vindication, recognition, a chance to matter again. He looked around Commander Wells' office. It was small and cramped. The furniture was old. Everything on Station Carthage was old. But it was real. The work was real. The people were real. No, Roy said. Both knights stared at him. No, Aldrich repeated. I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I don't belong with the knights. You would have full authority. I don't want authority. I want to fix things. Roy pointed toward the corridor. Out there, people depend on their equipment working. Mining rigs, environmental systems, medical equipment. When those things break, they need someone who can fix them fast and fix them right. That's what I do. Soren looked confused. But surely you want recognition for your skills. You want people to know you were right. I know I was right. That's enough. Aldrich studied him carefully. You would give up the chance to clear your name officially? My name doesn't matter. The work matters. The knight captain was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. I had hoped you would say something like that. You did. Yes. Because it confirms what I suspected. You're not interested in glory or status. You're interested in doing the job well. Aldrich pulled out another datapad, which is why we're creating a new commendation. The Brennan Recognition. It will be awarded to civilian engineers who demonstrate exceptional skill and courage in service to others. You're naming it after me? You'll be the first recipient. Others will follow. Aldrich handed him the datapad. More importantly, we're establishing a new training program. Night vessels will rotate through civilian stations like Carthage. Our engineers will work alongside mechanics like you. They'll learn that there's more than one kind of expertise. Roy looked at the datapad. It showed the official documentation. The Brennan recognition was real. The training program was real. His discharge status was being changed to honorable. I don't know what to say, Roy admitted. Say you'll accept the commendation. And say you'll participate in the training program when our engineers arrive. Roy thought about it. Teaching young knights who thought they knew everything. Dealing with egos and attitudes. It will be frustrating, but maybe some of them would learn. Maybe some of them would start valuing practical knowledge over protocol. Maybe the next time a crisis happened, they'd remember the mechanic who taught them there was more than one way to solve a problem. I'll do it, Roy said, but I'm staying here. This is my station. We wouldn't ask you to leave, Aldrich said. He extended his hand. Thank you, Roy Brennan. The galaxy needs more people like you. Roy shook his hand. The knight's grip was firm and respectful. After they left, Commander Wells sat down heavily in his chair. You really turned down Master Engineer of the entire Night Fleet, Wells said. Yep. Why? Roy picked up his wrench. He had work to finish on the stabilizer core. Because they need someone to teach them. But this station needs someone to keep it running. Can't do both. Wells shook his head. You're either the wisest person I've ever met or the craziest. Probably a little of both. Roy headed back to the junction. The new stabilizer core gleamed under the work lights. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Clean lines, perfect function, no wasted parts. He ran his hand along the smooth metal surface and smiled. This was where he belonged. Not in some ceremonial position. Not teaching in a formal academy. Right here, in the junction, making sure the systems worked. The galaxy could keep its glory. Roy had everything he needed right here in his greasy coveralls and scarred hands. He had the work. That was enough. 2 weeks after the Knights left, Roy's comm unit buzzed while he was elbow-deep in a water recycling system. He wiped his hands and checked the display. Commander Wells wanted to see him immediately. Roy sighed. Immediately usually meant something was broken. He found Wells in the command center, staring at a communication screen. 3 young people in engineering uniforms stood nearby, looking nervous. What's going on? Roy asked. Wells gestured to the engineers. They just arrived on the morning transport. All 3 requested transfers to Station Carthage specifically. Roy looked at them. They couldn't be more than 25 years old. Fresh out of training? Probably. Why? The tallest one, a woman with short dark hair, stepped forward. We want to learn from you, sir. Don't call me sir. I work for a living. Roy crossed his arms. Learn what exactly? How to fix impossible problems, she said. Everyone in the engineering corps has heard about what you did. The stabilizer repair that saved 15,000 people. The manual valve control during the ambassador's departure. You're famous. Roy almost laughed. I'm not famous. I'm just a mechanic. You're the mechanic who outshined the Galactic Knights. One of the others said, a young man with nervous hands. They created a commendation named after you. And now night vessels are being sent to civilian stations for training, the third one added. The whole system is changing because of what you did. Wells cleared his throat. I approve their transfers. We can use the extra help. But I wanted you to know they're here specifically to work with you. Roy studied the 3 engineers. They looked eager and intimidated at the same time, probably expecting him to be some kind of hero. They'd be disappointed. What are your names? Roy asked. Patricia Donovan, the tall woman said. Ben Sheffield, the nervous one said. Yuki Tanaka, the third one said. Okay, Patricia, Ben, Yuki. Welcome to Station Carthage. I'm Roy. Not sir, not master engineer, just Roy. Got it. They nodded. Good. You want to learn from me? Fine. But I don't teach classes and I don't give lectures. You'll work alongside me. I'll show you what I'm doing and why. You'll ask questions when you don't understand. You'll make mistakes, and I'll tell you how to fix them. That's the deal. That's perfect, Patricia said. We'll see if you still think so after a week. Roy headed for the door. Come on. I've got a water recycler with a stuck impeller. First lesson starts now. The three engineers followed him through the station corridors. Roy didn't slow down or explain where they were going. If they wanted to learn, they could keep up. He led them to the environmental systems bay. The water recycler sat in pieces on his workbench. Someone already tried to fix this, Roy said, pointing to scratched bolts and damaged threads. They forced parts that didn't want to go. Made everything worse. First rule of repair work. If you have to force it, you're doing it wrong. Ben pulled out a data pad. Should I take notes? No. Watch my hands. Notes won't teach you feel. Roy picked up the stuck impeller. What's wrong with this? Patricia leaned closer. The bearing is seized. Why? Lack of lubrication? Partly. But look at the wear pattern. Roy turned the impeller to catch the light. See how it's uneven? This impeller was installed crooked. It's been rubbing against the housing for months. The friction generated heat. The heat broke down the lubricant. The bearing seized. Yuki frowned. The diagnostic computer should have caught an installation error. Should have. Didn't. Computers only know what they're programmed to look for. A good mechanic knows what to look for even when the computer says everything is fine. Roy showed them how to clean the bearing properly, how to check the housing for damage, how to install the impeller so it sat perfectly aligned. They watched in silence. Their expressions shifted from eager to focused. Good. They were actually paying attention. Your turn, Roy said, handing Patricia a different impeller. Install it. She took the part carefully and examined the housing. She cleaned the contact surfaces. She checked the alignment 3 times before seating the impeller. When she tightened the bolts, she did it in the proper sequence, a little at a time, keeping the pressure even. Not bad, Roy said, but you're thinking too much. Trust your hands more than your head. Over the next few days, the 3 engineers followed Roy everywhere. They learned to diagnose problems by sound. They learned which parts could be salvaged and which needed replacement. They learned that most repair manuals were written by people who had never actually done the repairs. Ben turned out to be good with electrical systems. Yuki had a talent for hydraulics. Patricia could look at a schematic and see problems nobody else noticed. They were raw, but they had potential. On the 5th day, an emergency call came through. A mining ship had suffered a power coupling failure. They were drifting and losing life support. Patricia, you're with me, Roy said. Ben, Yuki, monitor from here and be ready to coordinate. He grabbed his tools and headed for the docking bay. Patricia hurried to keep up. What's our approach? She asked. Fast and simple. Power coupling failures are usually caused by overload. We need to find what caused the overload and fix it before we can replace the coupling. They boarded the mining ship. The crew looked desperate. Roy ignored them and went straight to the engineering section. The power coupling was scorched black. The smell of burned components filled the air. What caused this? Roy asked the ship's engineer. I don't know. It just failed. Roy examined the surrounding systems. He found the problem in 30 seconds. Your main reactor is running at 120% capacity. Has been for weeks, judging by the heat scoring. You are pushing your ship beyond its limits. The engineer looked away. We needed to meet our quotas. And now you're dead in space. Roy pulled out his tools. Patricia, check the secondary power distribution. Look for anything else that's been stressed by the overload. She moved immediately, confident and efficient. She learned fast. Roy replaced the coupling with a spare from the mining ship's inventory. He also adjusted the reactor's safety limiters so they couldn't be bypassed anymore. You're going to fall short of your quotas now, the ship's engineer said. You're going to stay alive now, Roy corrected. Pick which one matters. They returned to Station Carthage. Patricia was quiet during the trip back. What's wrong? Roy asked. That engineer was willing to kill himself and his crew for quotas. That's insane. That's desperation. Mining companies push hard. People feel like they have no choice. But you gave him one. You fixed his ship and made it impossible for him to overload again. Roy shrugged. Sometimes helping people means protecting them from their own bad decisions. Back on the station, Ben and Yuki had dinner ready in the small break room Roy usually ate in alone. The three engineers had started bringing extra food to share. The mining ship is away safely, Ben reported. Their crew sent a message thanking you. They should thank Patricia. She caught 2 more stress components I would have missed. Patricia looked surprised. Really? Really? You got good eyes. Roy sat down and accepted a plate of something that smelled decent. You're all learning fast. Faster than I expected. We have a good teacher, Yuki said. I'm not teaching. I'm just working. You're watching. That's the best kind of teaching, Patricia said. You show us why things matter instead of just what to do. Roy ate in silence for a moment. These 3 engineers reminded him of himself when he was younger. Eager to prove themselves. Wanted to be good at something that mattered. He hoped they wouldn't make his mistakes. But he knew they'd make their own. That was part of learning. Tomorrow we're rebuilding a plasma cutter, Roy said. It's going to take all day, and it's going to be tedious. You'll probably get bored. We'll be there, Ben said immediately. The other 2 nodded. Roy allowed himself a small smile. Yeah, I figured you would be. After they left, Roy cleaned up and headed back to his quarters. His comm unit showed a message from Night Lieutenant Soren. The first group of night engineers would arrive in 2 weeks for training. Roy groaned. Teaching 3 eager civilians was one thing. Teaching proud knights will be something else entirely. But he'd agreed to do it. So he'd do it. He fell asleep thinking about lesson plans and wondering if knights would be as willing to lure as Patricia, Ben, and Yuki. Probably not. But that was their problem. His job was to show them what real engineering looked like. Whether they chose to learn was up to them. The night engineers arrived exactly on schedule. 6 of them in perfect formation, wearing uniforms so clean they looked uncomfortable. Roy watched them disembark from the observation deck and sighed. They look nervous, Patricia said beside him. They look arrogant, Roy corrected. Nervous people fidget. Arrogant people stand too straight. Ben left. You can tell that from up here. Watch their body language. They're here because they were ordered to be here, not because they want to learn from a civilian mechanic. Commander Wells met the knights in the docking bay. Roy stayed where he was. Let them follow protocol and ceremony. He'd meet them in the repair bay where actual work happened. An hour later, the 6 knights appeared at his door. Wells stood behind them, looking apologetic. Roy Brennan. May I introduce the Night Engineering Training Unit? Wells said formally. They're here to learn from Station Carthage's best. Roy wiped his hands on a rag. You could drop the ceremony. I'm not big on titles. The lead knight, a stern woman with gray hair, stepped forward. I am Senior Engineer Diane Cross. We have been assigned to your training program for 6 weeks. Good for you. I am Roy. This is Patricia, Ben, and Yuki. We'll all be working together. Diane's expression suggested she didn't think much of the civilian engineers. We were told we would receive instruction in advanced repair techniques. You were told wrong. You'll receive work. If you learn something while doing it, great. If not, that's on you. One of the younger knights spoke up. With respect, we've all completed advanced engineering courses at the Knight Academy. We're certified in multiple repair disciplines. Certified means you pass tests. It doesn't mean you can fix things. Roy pointed to a disassembled turbine on his workbench. That turbine is from a ventilation system. Something is wrong with it. Figure out what and fix it. The knights exchanged glances. Then they approached the workbench as a group. Roy watched them work. They consulted data pads. They checked specifications. They measured tolerances. They did everything by the book. After 30 minutes, Diane looked up. The specifications show no defects. This turbine should function properly. And yet it doesn't. Why? The specifications must be incorrect. Roy shook his head. The specifications are fine. The turbine is wrong. Try again. The knights looked frustrated. They rechecked their measurements, consulted different technical manuals, ran diagnostic algorithms. Patricia whispered to Roy, should we help them? Not yet. Let them struggle. That's how you learn. Another 30 minutes passed. The knights were getting visibly annoyed. Finally, the youngest one picked up the turbine and turned it over in his hands. Wait, he said. The balance is off. I can feel it. Feel it how? Diane asked. The weight distribution. It's not centered properly. Roy walked over. Good. You're starting to use your hands instead of your datapad. What's your name? Leonardo Gravis. Okay, Leonard. Why is the balance off? Leonard examined the turbine more carefully. One of the blades is a different alloy, slightly heavier than the others. Someone replaced a blade with the wrong part. Exactly. The specifications won't tell you that. The diagnostics won't catch it. But your hands will feel it when the turbine spins. That's the first lesson. Trust your senses more than your computers. Diane frowned. Surely proper maintenance records would prevent this kind of error. Should prevent it. Don't prevent it. People make mistakes. Parts get mislabeled. Records get lost. A good engineer knows how to catch problems that shouldn't exist, but do anyway. Over the next few days, Roy gave the Knights increasingly difficult challenges. A hydraulic pump with intermittent failures. An electrical system with a short that only appeared under specific conditions. A cooling unit that worked perfectly in tests but failed in actual use. Diane and most of her team struggled. They kept wanting to follow procedures and protocols. When the procedures didn't work, they got frustrated instead of adapting. Leonard was different. He started watching how Roy, Patricia, Ben, and Yuki approached problems. He asked questions about why they checked certain things first. He made mistakes and learned from them instead of making excuses. One afternoon, an alarm blared through the station. One of the primary oxygen generators had failed. Roy grabbed his tools. Patricia, Leonard, you're with me. Everyone else, monitor backups and be ready. They ran to the environmental control section. The generator was overheating badly. Warning lights flashed everywhere. What do we do? Leonard asked. Think. What causes generators to overheat? Blocked airflow, failed cooling, electrical overload, mechanical friction. Good. Start checking. Fast. Leonard and Patricia split up, examining different systems. Roy went straight to the cooling manifold. He found the problem immediately. A filter had collapsed, blocking coolant flow. Leonard, I need a replacement filter. Type 7 Delta. We don't have those in stock. They were supposed to arrive last week. Roy cursed. Then we improvise. Find me a Type 6 Gamma and a Type 8 Beta. Those aren't compatible with this system. They will be when we modify them. Move. Leonard ran. Patricia stayed with Roy, helping him carefully extract the collapsed filter without damaging the manifold. We're going to combine two incompatible parts. Patricia asked. We're going to make them compatible. The 6 Gamma has the right diameter, but wrong length. The 8 Beta has the right filtration, but wrong mounting. We'll use the housing from one and the filter element from the other. Leonard returned with the parts. Roy showed them how to carefully remove the filter element from the 8 Beta and install it in the 6 Gamma housing. It required precise cutting and sealing, but it worked. They installed the improvised filter. The cooling system kicked in. The temperature started dropping. That shouldn't have worked, Leonard said, staring at the readings. It worked because we understood what each part actually does instead of just following the compatibility charts. Roy closed the access panel. Sometimes the book is wrong. Sometimes the parts you need don't exist. You have to solve the problem with what you have. Leonard was quiet for a moment. They don't teach this at the academy. I know. That's why you're here. That evening, Roy found Leonard sitting alone in the observation deck. The young knight was staring at his hands. Problem? Roy asked. I've been thinking about everything I learned at the academy. Years of training, certifications, advanced courses, and a civilian mechanic is better than all of it. Roy sat down next to him. That's not true. Your training gave you a foundation. You know theory, mathematics, system design. That's valuable. You just never learned how to apply it when things don't go according to plan. So, my education was worthless? No, it was incomplete. There's a difference. Roy looked out at the stars. The academy taught you how systems should work. I'm teaching you how they actually work. Both are important. Senior Engineer Cross thinks you're wasting our time. She says we should be learning from Knight Master Engineers, not civilian mechanics. She might be right, or she might be afraid to admit that her way isn't the only way. Roy stood up. Here's what I know. When the oxygen generator failed, you didn't freeze. You didn't insist on proper parts. You adapted. That's the difference between a mechanic who survives and one who doesn't. Leonard nodded slowly. Thank you for teaching me. I didn't teach you anything. You learned it yourself. I just gave you the opportunity. The 6 weeks passed faster than Roy expected. Leonard became genuinely skilled at improvised repairs. 2 of the other knights started asking real questions instead of defensive ones. Even Diane softened a little, though she never fully accepted that a civilian could teach her anything. On their last day, Knight Lieutenant Soren arrived to collect his engineers. He found Roy in the repair bay, working on yet another broken piece of equipment. How did they do? Soren asked. Leonard will be a great engineer if he keeps learning. The others might get there eventually. Diane is hopeless. Soren laughed. She filed 3 complaints about your teaching methods. Only 3? She's mellowing. Seriously, though, this program is changing things. Knight engineers across the fleet are requesting civilian station assignments. They want to learn what you taught this group. Roy set down his wrench. I didn't teach them anything fancy, just basic repair work. Basic repair work that saves lives when protocols fail. That's what the Knights need to learn. Soren paused. We're naming the training program after you. The Brennan Engineering Initiative. You people really like naming things after me. You keep doing things worth naming after you. After the Knights left, Roy returned to his normal work. Patricia, Ben, and Yuki were now fully capable engineers. They handled most repairs without his supervision. Commander Wells stopped by the repair bay one afternoon. You've trained 11 engineers in 2 months. Word is spreading. I'm getting transfer requests from across the sector. Tell them we're full. Roy, you've started something important. Young engineers want to learn real skills, not just pass certification tests. You could expand this. Create a formal program. Roy thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. No, the moment it becomes formal, it becomes about the program instead of the work. I'll teach whoever shows up and wants to learn. But I'm not running a school. Wells smiled. I figured you'd say that. He pulled out a small box. This came from Knight Captain Aldrich. Inside was a medal. Simple design, no fancy decorations. Just an engraved turbine blade and the words Brennan Recognition, first recipient. Roy held it for a moment, then set it on his workbench next to his tools. Aren't you going to display it somewhere? Wells asked. It's displayed right here where I work. That's what matters. 3 months later, Roy was training his 4th group of engineers when Patricia ran into the repair bay looking excited. You need to see this, she said, pulling up a news feed on her datapad. The headline read, Civilian Engineers Save Knight Flagship After Battle Damage. The story detailed how 3 civilian engineers, trained in the Brennan Initiative, had improvised repairs on a damaged Knight vessel using nothing but spare parts and creative thinking. The Knight's own engineers had declared the ship unsalvageable. The civilians had it flying again in 6 hours. Roy read the article twice. Then he handed back the datapad. Good for them, he said, and went back to work. But he was smiling. The galaxy was learning that real engineering wasn't about following rules. It was about understanding systems well enough to fix them when the rules didn't apply. It was about trusting your hands and your brain more than your certifications. It was about doing the work that needed doing, whether anyone noticed or not. Roy Brennan had outshined the Knights not by being better than them, but by showing them there was more than one way to shine. And across the galaxy, in repair bays and engine rooms and maintenance corridors, mechanics were proving him right every single day. The work continued. That was what mattered. Everything else was just noise.